I never thought my own son would betray me like this. My name is Margaret Patterson, and I'm 58 years old. After working double shifts as a nurse for 30 years in Chicago's busiest emergency room, I finally saved enough for my dream trip to Dubai, $26,000 for a luxury vacation I'd been meticulously planning for 2 years. Every penny came from sacrifices. I'd skip dinner out with friends, buy generic groceries, and work extra weekend shifts while my colleagues complained about being tired. My small house in Lincoln Park had needed a new roof for 3 years, but I chose to let it leak a little. Longer, so I could afford this once-in-a-lifetime experience. My son Jake, 28, had been struggling financially since losing his job at the prestigious marketing firm downtown 6 months ago. His unemployment benefits barely covered his rent in his trendy Wicker Park apartment, and I'd already helped him with groceries and utilities multiple times. When he started dating Emma, a 26-year-old social media influencer with expensive tastes and zero understanding of financial responsibility, his expenses somehow doubled. The manipulation started subtly. "Mom, Emma's never been anywhere exotic. She grew up poor in Indiana, you know? This could be life-changing for her." Then it escalated. "If Emma can't come, I can't justify spending money on a vacation when I'm unemployed. Maybe we should cancel the whole thing." Finally, the emotional blackmail. "This trip could save our relationship, Mom. Emma's been distant lately because she feels like I can't provide for her. If she sees I can take her somewhere amazing like Dubai, maybe she'll realize I'm worth staying with." Against every instinct screaming in my head, I refinanced my house. The paperwork was humiliating, having to justify to a 25-year-old loan, officer why a 58-year-old nurse needed to borrow against her modest home equity. But Jake's tears seemed genuine, and I'd spent his entire life putting his happiness before my own financial security. The planning process became a nightmare. Emma had opinions about everything. She wanted the most expensive hotels, first-class flights, and premium restaurant reservations. She'd text me links to 500 per-person dining experiences with messages like, "Jake said you wouldn't mind covering this since you're already paying for everything else." She never once thanked me directly. Every conversation went through Jake, as if acknowledging my generosity would somehow diminish her position in their relationship. I started feeling like a walking ATM rather than a family member joining a vacation. The day before departure, Jake called me with a trembling voice that I now realize was more calculated than nervous. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something. Really important." My heart sank as I sensed trouble brewing in his tone. "Emma's been having severe anxiety attacks about meeting you on such an expensive trip," he said, avoiding eye contact through our FaceTime call. "Her therapist thinks it would be better if she went instead of you. You know, to get comfortable with the places we'll be visiting together in the future when we're married." The audacity was breathtaking. Not only was he asking me to give up my trip that I'd paid for entirely, but he was framing it as a medical necessity and a future investment in their relationship. "Jake, are you seriously asking me to give up the vacation I've been planning for 2 years and paid for with money I borrowed against my house? It's not like that, Mom. You can go next year when your financial situation is better. Emma and we really need this time together to strengthen our relationship. She's been questioning whether I can provide for her, and this trip could prove that I can." The betrayal cut deeper than any surgical blade I'd ever handled in the ER. After everything I'd sacrificed for him, his college tuition at Northwestern University, his car payments when he was unemployed, countless emergency loans I'd never asked him to repay, years of covering his health insurance, this felt like the ultimate slap in the face. "I can't believe you're doing this to me, Jake, after everything I've given up for you." But my son had already made his choice. His loyalty was to a woman who'd never contributed a dollar to our family over the mother who'd raised him alone. After his father abandoned us when Jake was 5, and I was about to make a choice that would change both our lives forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at my packed suitcase in the corner of my bedroom, thinking about the injustice of it all. Emma wasn't even contributing a single dollar to this trip, yet she was demanding my spot like she was entitled to the fruits of my 3 decades of labor. I'd met Emma only 3 times, and each encounter left me feeling like she saw me as an obstacle rather than Jake's mother. During their first visit to my house, she'd walked around critiquing my furniture, asking Jake loudly why I still lived like this when I had a good job. She'd never asked about my work, my interests, or made any effort to build a relationship with me. The second meeting was at Jake's birthday dinner, where Emma spent the entire evening on her phone, posting Instagram stories about the cute little family restaurant I'd chosen, clearly mocking the modest Italian place that had been Jake's favorite since childhood. When I tried to engage her in conversation about her work, she'd responded with one-word answers while continuing to scroll through her phone. The third encounter was when they'd come to ask for money for the Dubai trip. Emma sat silently while Jake made his emotional appeal, but I caught her rolling her eyes when I asked about their budget and timeline. She clearly thought I was being unnecessarily cautious with money that she felt they deserved. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of confronting Jake directly and giving him another opportunity to manipulate, I decided to gather information first. I called United Airlines and discovered something interesting. While the tickets were non-transferable, I had complete control over them since they were purchased with my credit card. Mrs. Patterson, since you're the primary purchaser, you can cancel any of these reservations and receive a partial refund according to our policy, the customer service representative explained patiently. I also contacted the Atlantis Hotel in Dubai where we had reservations. Since I was the primary cardholder and had made all the bookings, I had full control over our accommodations. The concierge, Amira, was incredibly helpful when I explained my situation. Mrs. Patterson, I completely understand your disappointment. Family travel disputes are more common than you might think, she said with genuine sympathy. Would you like us to modify your reservation to a single occupancy in our presidential suite? Since you're now traveling alone, we can upgrade you at no extra charge as a gesture of goodwill for the inconvenience you've experienced. My heart started racing with a mixture of revenge and excitement. Jake thought he could manipulate me the same way he had throughout his adult life, but he was about to learn that his 58-year-old mother wasn't going to be pushed around anymore. I spent the morning making strategic phone calls. I canceled Emma's ticket, but kept mine and Jake's reservations active. I upgraded my hotel room and made dinner reservations for one at the restaurants I'd been most excited to try. I also booked a private desert safari and a spa day, experiences I'd originally planned to share with Jake. Then I crafted the perfect text message to Jake. Have a wonderful trip, honey. I hope you and Emma create beautiful memories together. See you when you get back. I didn't mention that Emma's ticket was canceled, that I'd kept my own reservations, or that I was still going to Dubai, alone, but in luxury. When Jake and Emma arrived at O'Hare Airport 3 hours later, confident in their victory and probably laughing about how easily they'd manipulated me, they discovered that Emma couldn't board the plane. The gate agent was professional, but firm. I'm sorry, but this reservation has been canceled. You'll need to purchase a new ticket. Jake's frantic calls started immediately, his voice escalating from confusion to panic to anger. Mom, what did you do? Emma's ticket is canceled. The gate agent says it was canceled yesterday. I'm sorry, son. I guess when someone changes travel plans at the last minute, complications arise. These things happen with airline reservations. Mom, please, we need to fix this. Emma is crying. People are staring at us. This is humiliating. I understand it's disappointing, Jake, but you made it very clear that this trip was more important for Emma than for me. I respected your decision. The real surprise was yet to come, and I was already 35,000 feet in the air when they figured out the full extent of my response. 24 hours later, I was sipping Dom Perignon champagne in first class, 35,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, watching the sunrise paint the clouds in shades of gold and pink. The flight attendant, Sarah, kept checking on me every hour, ensuring I had everything I needed. She'd noticed I was traveling alone and had gone out of her way to make the journey special. "First time to Dubai?" she asked warmly while refilling my champagne glass. "Yes, and it's been a long time coming," I replied, feeling genuinely happy for the first time in months. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. No one was demanding my attention, my money, or my sacrifice. I was reading a novel, watching movies, and enjoying conversations with interesting passengers without worrying about anyone else's needs or moods. Dubai was more magnificent than I'd ever imagined. The Burj Khalifa pierced the sky like a golden needle, and the city sprawled in every direction with architectural marvels that seemed to defy physics. The desert sunset painted everything in shades of orange, pink, and purple that no photograph could capture. My presidential suite at the Atlantis overlooked the Persian Gulf, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made me feel like I was floating on water. The suite itself was larger than my entire house in Chicago. A living area with Italian marble floors, a dining room that could seat 8 people, a bedroom with a king-sized bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud, and a bathroom with a jacuzzi tub overlooking the ocean. Fresh orchids were arranged throughout the space, and a welcome basket contained exotic fruits, premium chocolates, and a bottle of champagne with a note from the hotel management. Meanwhile, Jake's messages were becoming increasingly desperate. The first few were angry. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're being petty and vindictive." Then confused. "I don't understand why you're doing this to us." Then pleading, "Mom, please call me back. Emma is devastated. We can't afford another ticket." On such short notice. Finally, the truth started emerging in his messages. "This is ruining our relationship. Emma's parents are asking questions about why my mother would do this to us. How could you be so selfish? This was supposed to prove to Emma that I can provide for her, and now she's questioning everything about our future together." The irony wasn't lost on me. Jake was worried about proving he could provide for Emma using money I had provided for both of them. But I wasn't done yet. The real twist came when I met Hassan, the hotel's guest relations manager, during my second day. During our conversation about activities and excursions, I mentioned my situation, and his eyes lit up with an idea that would serve justice in the most unexpected way. "Mrs. Patterson, what if I told you there's a way to turn this negative experience into something positive, not just for you, but for other people who might be in similar situations?" Hassan was a thoughtful man in his 40s who'd worked in hospitality for 20 years and had seen every family drama imaginable. Hassan introduced me to Yasmin al-Rashid, a documentary filmmaker from Dubai who specialized in stories about family, dynamics, and financial exploitation. She'd been looking for authentic stories about generational conflicts and economic manipulation within families for a project about modern family relationships. "Your story resonates with so many people worldwide," Yasmin explained over traditional Arabic coffee in the hotel's elegant lounge. She was a petite woman with intelligent eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put me at ease. Financial exploitation by adult children is an epidemic that no one talks about openly. Would you be willing to share your story? We could create something powerful about standing up for yourself and setting boundaries. I thought about all the times I'd remained silent when Jake took advantage of my generosity. Not just this trip, but years of one-sided financial support that he'd never acknowledged or appreciated. The car payments, the insurance premiums, the emergency loans that were never repaid, the groceries I'd bought when he was tight on cash, the utility bills I'd covered when he was between jobs. "Yes," I said firmly, feeling a strength I hadn't experienced in decades. "Let's do it. If my story can help other parents avoid being taken advantage of, then something good will come from this betrayal." The decision to participate in the documentary felt like reclaiming my voice after years of being silenced by guilt and manipulation. The documentary process began immediately and proved to be more therapeutic than I'd expected. Yasmin's team was professional, sensitive, and deeply committed to telling authentic stories that could create positive change. They understood that this wasn't just about exposing Jake's behavior, but about highlighting a pattern that affects millions of parents worldwide. Adult children who exploit their parents' love and financial resources without reciprocity, gratitude, or even basic respect. We filmed at iconic Dubai locations over the course of 5 days. At the Gold Souk, surrounded by gleaming jewelry and precious metals, I talked about the real value of hard work and the years of sacrifice that had gone into saving for this trip. The contrast between the luxury around me and my modest lifestyle back home illustrated perfectly how I'd prioritize this experience over my own comfort. Every piece of jewelry in this market represents someone's labor, someone's dreams, I explained to the camera while vendors called out their wares in multiple languages. My dream cost me 30 years of double shifts, skipped meals, and delayed home repairs. It wasn't just money, it was pieces of my life. The gold merchants, Ahmed and Khalil, had overheard our conversation and approached with genuine interest. They shared their own stories of family sacrifice and generational expectations. In our culture, Ahmed explained, children are expected to care for parents as they age. What you describe, taking without giving back, this is not love. This is selfishness. Their wisdom added depth to my understanding. I wasn't just dealing with an American family dynamic. This was a universal human issue that transcended cultures and economic systems. At the Dubai Mall, one of the largest shopping centers in the world, we discussed how material desires can corrupt family relationships. Standing among stores selling items that cost more than most people's monthly salaries, I reflected on how Emma's expensive tastes had influenced Jake's sense of entitlement. When your child's partner expects luxury they haven't earned, and your child enables that expectation using your resources, you're not helping them build a healthy relationship. You're teaching them that love means financial exploitation, I said while shoppers moved past us carrying bags from designer stores. We filmed inside a Cartier boutique where a single watch cost more than my annual grocery budget. The sales associate, Maria, had worked in luxury retail for 15 years and had witnessed countless family dramas over expensive purchases. I see this constantly, she whispered between takes. Adult children bringing their parents to buy engagement. Rings, watches, jewelry, always paid for by the parent, never acknowledged as the gift it is. Your story needs to be told. The most powerful filming took place in the desert at sunset. The vastness of the landscape helped me process the magnitude of what had happened and put it into perspective. Sitting on traditional cushions in a Bedouin-style tent while the sand dunes changed color in the fading light, I found words for emotions I'd been carrying for years. Our Bedouin guide, Omar, shared tea with us and spoke about desert wisdom. In the desert, every drop of water is precious. You do not waste it on ungrateful ground. Family is the same. Your love and resources should be given to those who value and cherish them. Tell me about the moment you realized you had to take action, Yasmin prompted during our interview, her camera operator capturing the golden light that made everything look cinematic. It wasn't just about the money, I explained, sand swirling gently around us carried by the evening breeze. It was about respect, recognition, and reciprocity. I've spent 3 decades putting Jake's needs before my own. I paid for his education, at an expensive private university, supported him through multiple periods of unemployment, never asked for anything back, never made him feel guilty for accepting help. But when he asked me to sacrifice my dream vacation so his fiancée could enjoy what I'd paid for, that crossed every line. I talked about the pattern of behavior that had started in his teenage years, the assumption that my resources were available for his use without question or appreciation. The way he'd learned to frame his requests as emergencies or opportunities I couldn't refuse. The guilt trips when I hesitated to give him money. The lack of gratitude or acknowledgement of my sacrifices. I realized I wasn't helping him become independent I was enabling him to remain dependent while treating me with less respect than he'd show a bank, I continued. At least banks expect repayment and charge interest. During our break, I received a call from my neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd been watching my house. Margaret, there are reporters at your door asking about Jake and Emma. Word is getting out about what you're doing over there. The story was already spreading through social media. Someone at O'Hare Airport had filmed Jake and Emma's confrontation with the gate agent, and the video was going viral with captions speculating about the drama. The story took an unexpected turn when Hassan connected me with Fatima Al-Mansouri, a local charity worker who ran a foundation supporting exploited elderly people in the UAE. She'd heard about my story through Yasmin and had a proposal that would turn my personal vindication into something much larger and more meaningful. Margaret, what if we used your story to launch an international awareness campaign? Fatima asked during our meeting at her organization's headquarters. We could call it Respect Your Elders, focusing on financial exploitation within families and helping parents recognize and respond to manipulative behavior from adult children. Fatima's office was filled with testimonials from elderly people who'd been financially exploited by family members. Photos on the walls showed seniors who'd lost their homes, their savings, their dignity to adult children who saw them as ATMs rather than human beings deserving respect. Fatima showed me statistics that were shocking. In the UAE alone, thousands of elderly people were supporting adult children and grandchildren who contributed nothing back to the family. In the United States, the numbers were even more staggering. Millions of parents over 50 were delaying their own retirement and depleting their savings to support adult children who could work but chose to rely on their parents instead. Your case is unique because you fought back, Fatima explained. Most parents suffer in silence, believing that love requires endless sacrifice. You've shown that saying no can be an act of love for yourself and ultimately for your child's. Character development. Back in Chicago, Jake was finally understanding the consequences of his actions, but not in the way I'd hoped. Instead of self-reflection, he was doubling down on his victim narrative. His fiancée Emma, furious about missing the Dubai trip and humiliated by the public nature of their airport rejection, had started questioning their relationship fundamentally. Through mutual friends, I learned that Emma had discovered Jake's pattern of depending on his mother financially and was wondering what kind of future partner he'd be if he couldn't support himself, let alone a family. She'd also learned about the other times he'd borrowed money from me, information he'd apparently kept from her. My friend Jennifer from work called with updates. Margaret, Emma's been telling people that Jake lied to her about paying for half of everything. She's realizing that you've been subsidizing their entire relationship. The irony was delicious. His attempt to prioritize Emma over me was backfiring spectacularly, and his relationship was crumbling anyway. His manipulation had finally reached someone who wasn't bound by maternal love and obligation. The documentary premiered simultaneously on Dubai TV, Al Jazeera English, and several international networks within 2 weeks of completion. The Mother Who Said No, a story of financial exploitation and family boundaries, became an unexpected viral sensation, generating millions of views across multiple platforms and sparking conversations about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and elder respect in households worldwide. Within 48 hours, the documentary had been translated into 15 languages and shared on social media platforms globally. Netflix had already reached out about streaming rights, and major news outlets were requesting exclusive interviews. The response was overwhelming and immediate. My phone buzzed constantly with messages, emails, and social media notifications from people sharing their own stories of being financially exploited by adult children, spouses, or other family members. The production company had to hire additional staff just to handle the volume of responses. Yasmin called me daily with updates. Margaret, we're getting thousands of emails from parents thanking you for giving them courage. This is becoming bigger than we ever imagined. The hashtag #RespectYourElders started trending globally with Thousands of parents finding courage to set boundaries with their demanding adult children. Stories poured in from every continent. Mothers who'd mortgaged their homes to pay for adult children's weddings. Fathers who'd delayed retirement to fund their children's business ventures that never materialized. Grandparents who'd depleted their life savings to cover grandchildren's education while their own children lived beyond their means. A particularly powerful story came from Maria Santos in Brazil, who'd sold her family farm to pay for her son's medical school education, only to have him move to Europe and cut contact with her once he became successful. "Your courage gave me strength to tell my story too," she wrote. "Now my son knows the world sees what he's done." Dr. Sarah Chen, a family therapist from San Francisco, reached out to me through the documentary's production company. "Margaret, your story has opened a conversation that's been needed for decades. I've been treating families destroyed by this dynamic for 20 years, and your courage in speaking out is helping my patients understand they're not alone." Dr. Chen arranged for me to speak at a conference of family therapists in Los Angeles. The auditorium was packed with mental health professionals who'd been dealing with this issue in their practices but had never seen it addressed so publicly and powerfully. Financial exploitation by adult children is often dismissed as family business, Dr. Chen explained to the audience. Margaret's story shows us that sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is refuse to enable destructive behavior. Media outlets began requesting interviews. I appeared on morning shows, podcasts, and news programs, always emphasizing that this wasn't about punishing children, but about teaching them to value and respect their parents' sacrifices. The Ellen DeGeneres Show flew me out to Los Angeles. For a segment that reached 20 million viewers, Ellen herself was moved by the story. "You know, Margaret, what strikes me most is that you didn't just save yourself. You potentially saved Jake from becoming someone who would never learn to appreciate what he had." The interview went viral, with clips shared millions of times across social media platforms. Comments poured in from viewers sharing their own experiences with entitled adult children or expressing admiration for my courage in setting boundaries. Jake's reaction was devastating and eye-opening. Instead of apologizing or showing any self-awareness, he doubled down on his victim narrative with a fury that revealed his true character. He left voicemails screaming about how I'd humiliated our entire family and destroyed his life for social media attention. "Mom, you've embarrassed us in front of millions of people." Emma's parents saw the documentary and are questioning our engagement. "Her friends are calling me a mama's boy and a financial leech. How could you be so selfish and vindictive? All of this because you couldn't be flexible about one trip." His inability to see beyond his own embarrassment to understand my decades of sacrifice was perhaps the most revealing aspect of his response. He was more concerned about his public image than about the pain he'd caused me or the pattern of exploitation he'd established. Emma's response was even more telling and ultimately more mature. She called me directly, something she'd never done before, and her voice was shaking when I answered. "Margaret, I owe you a huge apology. I had no idea Jake had been taking advantage of you for years. Seeing all this laid out in the documentary, reading about your sacrifices, it's made me realize some things about who I was planning to marry." The conversation lasted 2 hours and was more honest than any interaction we'd ever had. Emma shared that Jake had been pressuring her parents to pay for their wedding, using the same emotional manipulation tactics he'd used on me. He'd told them that Emma deserved a $40,000 wedding because she'd had a hard childhood, and that paying for it would prove their love for her. "My parents are hardworking people who run a small restaurant," Emma explained. "They've saved every penny for their own retirement. When Jake suggested they should pay for our wedding because that's what loving parents do, I started seeing red flags I'd been ignoring." "I'm starting to see a pattern I don't like," Emma admitted. "When people don't give Jake what he wants, he makes them feel guilty and selfish. He's done it to you, to my parents, even to me when I've questioned our expenses. I thought it was just persistence, but now I see it's manipulation." She also revealed that Jake had been lying to her about his financial contributions to their relationship. She'd assumed he was paying for half of their expenses, but learned from the documentary that I'd been subsidizing his portion of their rent, groceries, and entertainment for months. "I feel like such a fool," Emma said tearfully. "I participated in taking advantage of your generosity because I believed Jake when he said he was handling his share of our expenses. I never questioned where the money was coming from." Meanwhile, Fatima's foundation had received over $50,000 in donations inspired by my story. We were using the money to create support groups for parents dealing with financially exploitative adult children and to develop resources for recognizing and responding to manipulation tactics. The foundation launched a hotline for exploited parents, staffed by volunteers who'd overcome similar situations. Within the first week, they received over 300 calls from parents seeking advice and support. "Your story gave us a framework for helping others," Fatima told me during one of our weekly check-ins. "Parents now have a vocabulary for what they're experiencing and examples of how to respond." The most beautiful and unexpected twist came when I met Ahmed Hassan, a 60-year-old widower from Dubai who'd seen the documentary. He was visiting Chicago for business and reached out through the production company to meet the brave American mother who'd inspired him to set boundaries with his own demanding adult son. Ahmed was elegant, thoughtful, and had his own story of learning to say no to adult children who'd taken his generosity for granted. His son had been pressuring him to buy an expensive apartment in Dubai as an investment that would primarily benefit the son's lifestyle. "Your courage gave me the strength to tell him no," Ahmed said over dinner at a Lebanese restaurant in Chicago. "Family love should not be measured in dollars, and respect should not be purchased with gifts." Our first meeting lasted 4 hours, with conversation flowing naturally from family dynamics to literature, travel, and philosophy. Ahmed understood the complexity of loving someone while refusing to enable their poor choices. 6 months later, my life had transformed completely beyond anything I could have imagined when I first boarded that plane to Dubai. The documentary had won 3 international awards for social impact, including recognition from the United Nations for raising awareness about elder financial abuse. I'd become an unlikely advocate for exploited parents worldwide, traveling to conferences and speaking at events I never could have envisioned attending. The recognition came with unexpected opportunities. Publishers reached out about book deals, universities offered visiting lecturer positions, and nonprofit organizations invited me to join their boards. The 58-year-old nurse, who'd once felt powerless against her son's manipulation, was now influencing policy discussions about family financial exploitation. Speaking engagements took me across the country and internationally. I addressed audiences at universities, community centers, and professional conferences, sharing my story and helping others find their voice. Each venue brought new stories from attendees who'd experienced similar exploitation and were learning to set healthy boundaries with their adult children. At Harvard Business School, I spoke to MBA students about ethical family financial relationships. "Success means nothing if it's built on exploiting the people who love you most," I told the future business leaders. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. At a conference in Seattle, I met Linda, a 62-year-old teacher who'd spent her retirement savings putting her son through law school, only to have him demand money for a house down payment immediately after graduation. "Your documentary saved my retirement," she told me. "I finally found the courage to say no." At an event in Miami, I encountered Roberto, a 65-year-old mechanic whose daughter expected him to pay for her children's private school tuition while she spent money on luxury vacations. "I thought love meant saying yes to everything," he shared. "You taught me that sometimes love means saying no." The most rewarding part was seeing real change happen. Parents who'd watched the documentary were finding the courage to say no to unreasonable demands. Adult children were beginning to understand the impact of their behavior on their parents' financial security and emotional well-being. Follow-up study conducted by Dr. Chen's research team found that 73% of parents who'd seen the documentary had successfully established new financial boundaries with their adult children, and 45% of those adult children had begun contributing financially to their families for the first time in years. Jake's relationship with Emma ended 3 months after the Dubai incident, but not in the way anyone expected. Emma had done her own research into financial manipulation and realized that marrying someone who couldn't respect his own mother was a red flag she couldn't ignore. More importantly, she'd seen how Jake reacted when faced with consequences, with anger, blame, and victimization rather than self-reflection or accountability. I realized that if Jake could treat the woman who raised him and supported him for decades with such disrespect, how would he treat me when things got difficult? In our marriage? Emma told me during a follow-up call months later. The Dubai situation was just a symptom of a deeper character issue. Emma had also discovered that Jake had been lying to her about many things: his job search efforts, his financial contributions to their relationship, and his plans for their future. The documentary had been a catalyst for her to examine their relationship more critically. "He was building our entire future on your generosity while taking credit for providing for me," Emma explained. "When I confronted him about the lies, he tried to manipulate me the same way he'd manipulated you, making me feel guilty for questioning him, acting like I was being unreasonable for expecting honesty." Emma had returned to school to pursue a master's degree in social work, inspired by the experience to help others recognize manipulation in relationships. She'd also started a blog about financial red flags in romantic relationships that gained significant following. The ending I never expected came when Jake finally showed up at my door 6 months after the documentary aired, not with demands, complaints, or justifications, but with something I hadn't seen from him in years: genuine remorse and a willingness to take responsibility for his actions. "Mom, I've been in therapy for 3 months," he said, standing on my porch with tears in his eyes and a letter in his hands. "I've been watching the documentary over and over, reading the comments from other people in my situation, talking to Dr. Martinez about my behavior patterns. I never realized how much I'd been taking advantage of your love." The therapy had been prompted not by guilt about our relationship, but by Emma's departure and his inability to maintain other relationships. His friends had started distancing themselves after learning about his treatment of me, and he'd been fired from a consulting job for similar patterns of entitlement and blame shifting. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I've been using emotional manipulation since I was a teenager, Jake continued. "I learned that if I made you feel guilty or selfish, I could get what I wanted. I never considered the cost to you, not just financially, but emotionally. I never thought about your dreams, your needs, your right to enjoy the money you'd worked so hard to earn." He'd gotten a job at a nonprofit organization helping young adults develop financial independence and healthy relationships with their parents, inspired, ironically, by the very documentary that had exposed his own failures. The work had given him perspective on how common his behavior was and how destructive it could be to families. "Every day I counsel young people who sound exactly like I used to sound," Jake said. "I hear them making excuses, blaming their parents, feeling entitled to support they haven't earned. It's like looking in a mirror and seeing how awful I was. I want to pay you back, not just for Dubai, but for everything. The car payments, the loans, the insurance premiums, the emergencies that weren't really emergencies. I've created a detailed payment plan. It's going to take 5 years, but I want to earn back your respect and trust." The letter he handed me contained a comprehensive accounting of every dollar I'd given him since his 18th birthday, along with a realistic repayment schedule based on his new salary. The total was staggering, over $180,000 in direct financial support over 10 years, not including the countless indirect subsidies like family dinners, gifts, and covered expenses during his visits home. More valuable than the payment plan was the detailed apology that showed he understood not just what he'd done, but why it was wrong and how it had affected me. He acknowledged specific incidents I'd almost forgotten. Times he'd made me feel guilty for hesitating to lend him money. Occasions when he'd dismissed my financial concerns as selfishness. Moments when he'd prioritized his wants over my needs. Without consideration. Ahmed and I had been corresponding for months, and his business visit to Chicago had blossomed into something beautiful and unexpected. He understood family sacrifice. He'd raised 4 children as a single father after his wife's death from cancer. But he also understood the importance of boundaries and mutual respect in relationships. Love without respect is not love. It is exploitation, Ahmed had told me during one of our many long phone conversations. Your son needed to learn this lesson, and you needed to teach it. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is allowing them to face the consequences of their choices. Ahmed's own journey with boundaries had been different but parallel. After his wife's death, his adult children had expected him to be available for childcare, financial support, and emotional caretaking without considering his own needs or grief process. Learning to say no had been essential for his healing and for their growth as independent adults. As I write this conclusion, I'm planning my second trip to Dubai, this time with Ahmed, and this time paid for with money I've earned from speaking. Fees and consulting work, helping other families navigate similar situations. Jake insisted on contributing to this trip, his first step in rebuilding our relationship on more equal and respectful terms. The transformation in Jake has been gradual, but genuine. He calls regularly now, not to ask for money but to check on my well-being and share updates about his work and personal growth. He's learned to budget, save, and live within his means. Most importantly, he's learned to express gratitude and appreciation for the sacrifices I've made throughout his life. Our relationship is different now. Healthier, more honest, built on mutual respect rather than financial dependency and emotional manipulation. Jake contributes to family gatherings, remembers my birthday without prompting, and asks about my interests and goals rather than just updating me on his needs. Sometimes the greatest act of love is saying no. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't just save you. It saves the people who need to learn that love doesn't mean endless, one-sided sacrifice. Sometimes a moment of apparent cruelty becomes the catalyst for genuine growth and healing. My $26,000 investment became something far more valuable than a vacation. It became my freedom, my voice, and ultimately the catalyst for positive change in thousands of families worldwide. It also became the foundation for a new relationship with my son based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. The mother who said no had finally learned to say yes to herself, to her own worth, to her right to be treated with respect, and to the possibility that love could be both generous and boundaried. Most importantly, I'd learned that protecting my own dignity was not selfish. It was essential for creating the kind of family relationships that honor everyone involved.